to computer. I would like to introduce you today for this is the third in the series of Indigo lectures. And I'd like to introduce you today to a good friend of mine, Barbara Shapiro, who's joining us from San Francisco, who is a master indigo dyer, and as she will tell you, has had some very unique studying, as has studied indigo, and her work consists of both textiles, meaning wovens, hand wovens, and hand dyed clothing and articles for the home, as well as baskets. And I'm going to let Barbara take over now.
Okay, well, hello, everybody. And I'm glad to be here. And I think I need to now share my screen. So how do I do that? Share screen.
Yeah.
Okay. And I don't see.
It's at the bottom. And
yeah, I've got that, but I don't see anything to click on.
Then get out of share screen. Get out of share screen. Now look at your work, and then no.
Okay.
Before you share screen, pull up your presentation and make both of them like, halfway, half on the screen. You have your PowerPoint or whatever it is.
Yeah, I just have to go to
and you can see it. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, and then I can put play, and that should be full screen. Okay, there we go. Excellent.
But now you need to do share screen.
Now share screen? Oh dear.
See, so what I do is I just set it up so that I can see it. And then hit share screen so that then you can pick it out of the little boxes and you know which one it is.
I don't have, all I have is the person who's speaking now, and it's just a tiny little box. I don't have any.
What I want you to do is I want you to go over to your right-hand corner, top corner, and go to view. And
top corner. I don't have it.
Your whole screen.
I have my desktop, and I don't have the Zoom.
Oh, you can't find Zoom? Go down to your bottom bar on your computer, and where you see the word Zoom, hit that one.
Yeah.
And that will bring
I do.
Back up.
It doesn't. Oh, now it's worse. Okay. No, all I have is this one little picture of me. Okay. There we go. Okay. Full screen. Back again. Now I'm on, right? So now I can go to.
Now you have to do share screen.
So to get that, I have to get it
down at the
bottom. Share screen.
And then choose screen.
And share, and it looks like it's going to be not at the beginning.
Now now you're there. You're there.
And I don't see.
Now you need to go to view. You want to go to
play?
Play. Yes.
Okay, there we go. All right. Thank you, Karen. First of all, let me say thank you to you again. And tell everybody that I am so happy to be called Karen Hampton's friend because I consider her a friend and have for many, many years, and I have tremendous respect for her. I'm honored to be one of the lecturers in this series on indigo and sustainability. I am a weaver, dyer, and basket maker with over 50 years of experience in the field of fiber art. For much of that time, indigo has colored my work and informed my studies and teaching. I have grown in both technical knowledge of indigo and skill through the decades, and my practice has evolved. Indigo has followed me as my work has shifted from art to wear, to handwoven art for the wall, to surface design on paper and commercial cloth, and for the last 19 years, mostly to sculptural basketry. I would like to share with you my love of indigo through a chronological look at some of my work and how I have progressed into an exciting and more sustainable practice in the last 2 decades. Since early on in my career, I have shared my love of indigo through many workshops and as an unpaid volunteer teaching assistant in the textile art department at San Francisco State University for 25 years. Every Tuesday and Thursday from 9 to 5, you could find me in the textile art classrooms and dye lab. There, I took on the job of maintaining our 2 50-gallon indigo vats and assisted students in using and learning about maintaining an indigo vat. I've also collected textiles in indigo from around the world, and I've shared what I know with countless students, including how to paint with active thickened indigo, which you see simmering to perfection in the center slide. During my 25 years at San Francisco State, I mostly created hand-woven silk wall hangings. These included both ikat and shibori design elements, dip dyeing, and textile paint, etc. Through the years, I studied with some of the best teachers. Of course, Candace Crockett, the department chair at San Francisco State, who was a very good friend, but also all the guest instructors who passed through the textile department through the years. I also learned indigo from Hiroyuki Shindo in Japan and Michel Garcia in France and when he visited us in Berkeley, and others. I owe them all a great debt of gratitude. Here are 2 works from my scroll series, Liquid Flame and Above an Indigo Sea, both from 2003, and a selection from my indigo landscape series called Moonscape from 2007. That's the piece on the right. I was using synthetic indigo at San Francisco State with a soda ash and thiourea dioxide reduction. This was common practice at the time. The fumes were not healthy for me, so I often wore a respirator mask, but it's very hard to teach with a respirator mask on, as we have all learned recently. Synthetic indigo is easy to use. It is finely ground, which can give a faster reduction and good results for students. The thiox reduction is also simple to do and fast. Both synthetic indigo and thiox, however, are chemicals with a big negative environmental footprint in production, use, and disposal. I think I partially lost my sense of smell due to exposure to thiox fumes. With my natural vat, once the powders are in solution, I no longer need a mask at all. I'm much happier now using naturally reduced indigo vat with natural indigo, even if it takes a little bit longer to achieve a complete reduction. Michel Garcia suggests regrinding your natural indigo if it's not fine enough. Of course, you must weigh it first and then grind it in a mortar and pestle with the wetting it down with a little bit of water. You can't weigh it afterwards. Here are 2 more works from my Indigo Landscape series. There, Under the Moon, 2007, and Flotsam, also 2007. Both works combine ikat with surface design techniques, including discharge, sponging, and painting with textile paint. In Flotsam on your right, I silk screened an adhesive in a shibori pattern onto the cloth and then used that to adhere the gold leaf. Flotsam was exhibited at the De Young Museum in To Die For, A World Saturated in Color in 2010. On the left, There Under the Moon represents the view of San Francisco Bay with the lights of Oakland in the distance. This is what we see from our condo window in San Francisco. Oakland native Gertrude Stein wrote of her hometown that there is no there. I was responding to her poetry with my own woven commentary on the beauty of Oakland from a distance. A bit of technical talk here. Indigo is a pigment that can be extracted from the leaves of several different plants. The extraction takes place in hot water and an alkaline solution into which air is beaten. There are many such plants around the world, but only a handful have enough pigment in them to be commercially viable. By beating vigorously to incorporate oxygen into the mixture, the pigment precipitates to the bottom of the container and is collected and dried for grinding or used as a paste. Indigo pigment is not soluble in water. So to create an active dye vat, you must dissolve the pigment by reduction, and this requires two ingredients, an alkali again, and a reducing agent, such as henna or fructose, wheat bran, or iron sulfate, and so on, in hot water. In a thoroughly reduced and settled vat, the liquid under the coppery sheen that's on the top of the vat turns a transparent yellow, green, or even reddish, and that latter is the case for the iron vat. The sediment on the bottom that contains the remaining reduction elements and some undissolved indigo. In the case of the iron vat, which is my favorite, the sediment is plaster, a byproduct of the reduction process. Once neutralized with a bit of vinegar, an exhausted indigo vat can be composted back into the earth in your garden, or it can be used as a starter for a new vat. Through the years, I used indigo in many smaller works like this card-woven piece called The Elders. It is Pima cotton, card-woven in broad diagonals, also called Egyptian diagonals for some reason. My work on paper included these panels on the right, which are named for the technique, kyokechi, or carved clamp board resist, on Japanese paper. All of the works that I'm sharing with you today have been exhibited one way or another through the years. Another important technical point is to keep the air out of your vat as much as possible. Michelle Garcia teaches how to do this by floating a dense foam disc about an inch thick, the same size as the opening of the vat, right on top of the level of the liquid, and also covering the vat when not in use. I also tie a double layer of terry cloth around the top of my vat, and I keep the water level high to limit the amount of air in the pot. A little more technical business. Wet, or for one particular effect, dry cloth, is carefully dipped in the liquid for several minutes or more. Between these dips, you remove the cloth from the vat, and you will see it turn from yellowish green to blue right before your eyes. This is the magic of indigo. Immediately after each dyeing dip, Michelle Garcia teaches to first soak the cloth in plain water, where the oxygen in the water goes deep into the folds of any resist and starts the aeration process. Then you aerate further in the air between successive dips in indigo. Complete aeration takes time. Removal of the resist ties or clamps and a thorough washout can be performed when the desired depth of cloth is achieved and the aeration process has finished completely. As with any dye, the color looks darker when wet. I usually wait 24 hours until the aeration process is complete before washing out any loose indigo. In Japan, some professional dyers wait weeks or even longer. You will get much less crocking or color transfer if you are patient and let the full indigo process take place. When complete, you can wash your cloth out with a liquid olive oil soap or other mild soap. Here is a gradation study I did in natural indigo. In 2008, I went to France with Yoshiko Wada for the 7th World Shibori Network Symposium in the village of Loris in the south of France, in Lyon, and in Paris. There first met and took workshops with Michelle Garcia, a natural dye chemist and scholar. He knows more about the history of indigo and the way it works on a chemical level than anyone I have encountered. He also points out the way that misinformation had been passed down through the centuries as one writer copied another without really understanding the working of Indigo. He has been my guru for decades now. Because I am fluent in French and in Indigo, I've translated the didactic materials he has produced for the many workshops he's taught through the World Shibori Network Slow Fiber Studios. And when he chose to write in English occasionally, I was able to correct the errors in his English that crept into the text due to his good but less than perfect command of the language, thus avoiding student confusion. For example, the French word for brush is pinceau. And he would say, now I want everybody to get a pencil. And they're all scurrying around looking for pencils, of course. And it never worked out right. We are good friends, Michelle and I. And I've promised to translate his Indigo book if he ever gets around to writing it. Here is Michel in his workshop. He is straining some indigo he has processed from fresh leaves and is pouring it through a cloth to save the pigment that he will dry to use later. In 2018, I spent another great week on a slow fiber studio study trip with him in Brittany, where he now lives. You can buy Michel Garcia's recorded workshops on DVD or subscribe to Slow Fiber TV through the World Shibori Network website, and I heartily recommend this. Here is another one of my teachers, Hiroyuki Shindo, working with his Sumiko dye vats submerged in the floor of his studio in Miyama, Japan, not too far from Kyoto. He also maintains the Little Indigo Museum in his traditional thatched roof home with an adjacent studio. In the center is a piece of hemp cloth that I dyed in his indigo vats in 2018. And on the right is that same piece of cloth that in 2020 became the first of my horn bag series. Hiro-san's wife showed us how to fold this typical Japanese utilitarian bag, and I have used that knowledge to create a series of wall pieces, which, after this first one, all have political content. This one is simply stitched in red silk. Japan has also influenced my textile art. After one of my half-dozen trips to Japan, I was fooling around with a stack of Japanese business cards that I had picked up. I dipped them in natural indigo in my studio. I was using my preferred reduction method of slaked lime and iron sulfate, which is a mineral vat, not chemical, and completely natural. After framing the little cards, I realized I had created a maquette, and I needed to translate it into what turned out to be my last major series of woven wall works. On the right is Foursquare from 2011. All the works in this series deal with California's severe drought and water conservation. All of them were composed of sections from a very long 9-inch wide band that I wove from Egyptian Pima cotton with a fine indigo stripe at near each selvage. Here are Offset and Sea Change, also 2011. I used a clamp resist process whereby selected pieces were clamped tightly and soaked in the water before dyeing, and then I got a straight resist line. Other sections were clamped a bit looser, and the cloth was dipped into the dye vat when it was still dry, which is a no-no, but it worked. And this allowed for what I call controlled seepage of the indigo into the clamped areas. Working with my natural indigo vat and multiple dips, I got a nice, dark, stable color. A curator friend of mine said that Sea Change, on your right, reflected the movement that she felt when she was on the ocean in a small boat. And I really love that reaction. I now source my indigo from Stony Creek Colors in Tennessee. Sarah Bellows, CEO of Stony Creek Colors, was honored in 2022 with the Groundbreaker Award at the Sustainable Fashion Awards Ethical Fashion Initiative in Milan, Italy. Sarah also works closely with Yoshiko Wada, founder of the World Shibori Network. The World Shibori Network supports her work and our shop carries her indigo, including a new indigo paste that is very easy to use. I suppose I should say at this time that I am a board member, recently became a board member of the World Shibori Network Foundation. Stony Creek indigo has a very high percentage of actual pigment and thus is very efficient. Michelle Garcia had testing done and discovered that much of the so-called natural indigo from India is actually boosted with synthetic indigo and is consistently lower in pigment content than Sarah Bellos's products. Ordering her grown and processed in the USA indigo also has a lower shipping footprint than international products. Why is using natural indigo so important? Indigo is a nitrogen fixer. It's an excellent rotation crop. Indigo actually releases nitrogen back into the soil through reacting with soil bacteria. So it enriches the soil when you grow indigo. Sarah's small farm partners do not need to use synthetic fertilizers. They have replaced tobacco crops with indigo, which is a real win-win. Several big-name fashion brands, including Lucky Brands, Wrangler, and Patagonia, have started using some of her indigo in their products. And Levi Strauss and Lewis and Clark Agri-Foods led a recent multi-million-dollar fundraising round for Stony Creek colors. So things are looking up. In 2004, I took my first serious basketry class with Lissa Hunter. And a few years later, I studied with Nancy Moore-Bess and Jackie Abrams, and subsequently many times with Jiro Yonizawa. Excuse me. There were many other fine teachers, but these four were the most influential. My first baskets were coiled painted wax linen, which was followed by indigo-dyed raffia, as in these works from 2007 and 2008. The trio of baskets are, on your left, are Golden Asp. That's the one with the asp, golden asp climbing around the top of the basket, and Molly basket, and Tagine in the middle. The pair on the right, un homme et une femme, a man and a woman, were inspired by that very romantic French movie from 1966. Most of you are probably too young to remember. My husband and I saw it on our second date in Lausanne, Switzerland, where we met. And I like to say that we are still on our third date 55 years later. I found that natural raffia took the indigo well. By dipping several groups of raffia together and removing one group for each subsequent dip, I got a nice gradation. I also learned that paper, bast fibers, and other basketry materials are partial to a slightly higher pH, which is what the iron sulfate and slaked lime formula offers. When I want to dye silk or wool, I use a henna or fructose formula for a slightly lower pH, which is required by these fibers. Cotton and linen seem fine with either one. When I tested my indigo vats at San Francisco State University, I used a bit of whatever natural white cloth was available in the studio to determine if I had a good reduction. And I saved all these precious fragments, and I always said that one day I would do something with them. After retiring from San Francisco State University, I started coiling with them, wrapped around a wired paper core and stitched with wax linen. I made a wall installation in various shades of blue called Testing Testing with 5 discs, each with a downward trailing working end. The title came from the test strips, obviously, but also the round-shaped test pattern broadcast on 1950s TV at the end of each evening's programming. In those days, there was no television programming between 11 p.m. and 6 a.m. Imagine that. You see here the second iteration of this study, Testing Testing number 2, from 2012. It speaks of the universality of indigo, with each coiled disc made of my saved test strips, now enlivened with bits of multicolored fabric from a particular part of the world where indigo was revered. In this case, the working end swirls down from the top of the disc, creating a 3-dimensional profile. This installation also honors friendship through these scraps of cloth gleaned from the ragbags of willing friends from a place where indigo practices flourished. I emailed all of these friends around the world and said, I need some scraps from your country, not indigo, but other colors. Discarded textiles from Sweden, France, India, Indonesia, West Africa, China, and Japan were sent to me along with family stories. This one came out of my mom's quilting bag in China. She doesn't quilt anymore, but she still had some of the fabrics and things like that. And these stories enchanted me as I slowly gave them and my own indigo scraps a new life. After many years of coiling, my hands told me to try another technique. I studied plating with Nancy Moore-Bess, and naturally, I often dipped the cane I was using in my indigo vat. Here is an early basket called Memory Vessel. Indigo dyed the interior of the cane a dark blue, but only stains the shiny surface a lighter color, except where abraded naturally. By sanding the surface of a piece with fine sandpaper, I can get a few dark pieces that I use to draw lines on the surface of the work. The open boat shape allows me to show off the contrast between the dark blue interior and the lighter exterior of the form, as you see in the detail. This work is hexagonally plated and then overwoven in random weave. I've made several iterations of this memory vessel through the years. I recently did some clampress dyeing in indigo on a linen panel. On the right, you see the origami folded cloth with the clamps removed, waiting to be washed and ironed out. By using my vat fairly often and stirring it every week, it lasts a long time. It can be recharged with a boost of the 3 ingredients dissolved in some hot water. The iron vat, also called the Swedish vat or the cold vat, does not need heat to work once it is set up, making it ideal for techniques that used paste resists, which come off in hot dye. I also save on electricity by not having to reheat my vat every time I use it. Concerning the textile industry in general, I offer you this quote from an article by author Peggy Orenstein. Fashion is responsible for more greenhouse gases than international flights and maritime shipping combined, not to mention a fifth of global plastics and trillions of microfibers, those tiny plastic threads shed by clothing when laundered that have become one of the biggest threats to the ocean. Treatment of the industry's largely female workforce in Asia, long a human rights concern, has deteriorated so badly since the pandemic that some activists now refer to it as the garment industrial trauma complex. Thank you, Peggy, for that insight. Not such a pretty story. Any changes we can make in our artistic practices and in our shopping habits are a step in the right direction. In 2021, during the pandemic, I made a children's book called The Journey of the Young White-Haired Warrior. Here are a few of the illustrations. The pages of heavy handmade Bhutanese paper were dipped in natural indigo before the collage illustrations were glued on. You can see a few test strips and other repurposed indigo elements in these collages. I had 50 copies of this book printed up. The story is an uplifting tale of finding happiness in difficult times. My grandchildren loved it. That's the best reward. Here is an example from a series of 7 top knot baskets created between 2018 and 2022. I used Sidori, or scraped cane, Sidori is a Japanese word, dipped several times in indigo. Indigo, as we said, only dyes the pithy underside of the cane, but by scraping part of the rounded top off the cane, it can be selectively dyed blue, providing a striped blue and white material. The technique of this basket and the whole series is the Japanese flower knot technique, which is plated on a hemp leaf plated base. I'm drawn to the technique because the flower knots are structural, not decorative. With each flower I create, the basket grows. I've recently completed a series of 6 pineapples in this same technique, which I'm not showing you today because they don't contain any indigo. Maybe one day I'll make a blue pineapple, but maybe not. Indigo bands are part of this work called Strength in Diversity. It was created in 2019. A political climate of division and exclusion provoked my response. The hexagonal-plated dyed cane globe supports band of hand-woven bast fibers, gampi, linden, rami, hemp, kudzu, straw, fique, which is also called agave, folded paper, and coconut cord. Bast fibers were typically used by commoners when silk, wool, and cotton were reserved for the wealthy and powerful, and indigo dye was the realm of the common man in many places. Each fiber I used demanded different care in weaving. Some had to be woven when they were spritzed with water to make them stronger. Others had to be woven dry. Some were tapestry woven, some were plain weave, etc., etc. Each fiber demanding different care provided a rich and diverse palette to make the work stronger, just as our human diversity makes for a stronger country and world. All of the globes in this series are about 14 inches in each direction. In 2020, I created Tikkun Olam, Repair the World, a globe slashed and repaired with gold leaf on raw kozo fiber. The repair in real gold references kintsugi, the practice of repairing broken ceramics with lacquer and gold leaf. I once took a class in that technique on ceramics, but now I prefer to apply it conceptually to my artwork. Tikkun Olam is the Hebrew phrase literally repair the world, and it is now an umbrella concept for our work on both ecological and social issues. The fragile skin on this globe is made of recycled teabag papers dyed in indigo and persimmon juice with fermented persimmon juice with sumi ink. Our damaged world is in need of repairs in so many ways. You can interpret this title as you like. A third globe in this series is called Troubled Waters, 2019. Scraped and dyed cane was again hexagonally plated on a plated hemp leaf base. Persimmon and indigo dyed inked papers and cloth form flowing bodies of polluted waters meandering around the surface of the globe. A pool of this same indigo-stained debris rests on the floor inside the basket in lieu of a pool of limpid waters. Human neglect puts our waterways and our very life on Earth in danger. Working in natural indigo is a tiny step in the right direction. This work was, until yesterday, on display in an exhibit called The Color of Water at the Sebastopol Center for the Arts in California. Here's my most recent indigo-dyed top knot basket. I thank you for your attention, and after the next slide with some useful links, you may want to take a photograph of the slide. I will be happy to answer any questions. And here are a link to my website, the World Shibori Network, where you can find links to Michelle Garcia's natural dye videos and Sarah Bellos's company Stony Creek Colors, a wonderful source of very pure natural indigo.
Thank
Voila.
you, Barbara. Thank you. Everyone, can you turn your cameras on, please?
It's always nice to see faces.
Let's see, there's so much. I'm so glad you talked about Stony Creek. Because I think that what Stony Creek is doing is really what is going to revolutionize the textile industry.
Hopefully, yes.
Well, or at least
It's just
the first real big step,
Yeah.
you know,
And
because
the product is wonderful, and such a high percentage of indigo and finely ground, so you probably don't have to regrind it. So it works beautifully. And it's American made, low shipping.
well, and that what she's doing is that she's using farmers who were previously growing tobacco, and they are transforming their crop to being indigo.
At least a rotation crop.
Mhm.
But some of them turn to indigo completely. When you plant indigo, you can get two harvests in a season, and then you put back into the soil the stalks, and well, the leaves are have the indigo, but the stalks and other parts of the plant, you mulch that and put it back into the soil, and it regenerates. As everybody learned from Senior Moment, Roland Ricketts. It's a big process. I don't do that. I source my natural indigo, and I work in my studio in a city. And I'm glad that Sarah is available to do the hard work of creating indigo for me.
Well, I think that in addition, it's the fact that she's servicing the home dyer as well as industry.
Yes,
And
and
so
she's now in 3 states.
oh,
I just saw
okay.
she now is also in Florida, and I can't remember the other state, but they're 3 in a row. So she's branching out. It's just
And
terrific.
Kentucky, and if it's Florida, then Florida as well. Yeah. I think that, it's just so important that if you're really thinking about sustainability, that industry has to have a way of getting in. And so I just think that what she's doing is so valuable. I did get some of the paste, and I've played with some of the paste, and and she also carries 2 different qualities of indigo, one that's 25% and then one that's 100%. So
I got some of the paste too, but I haven't tried it yet. But next time. I wonder how that would work in those little bottles that I make of the thickened indigo that you can actually put your brush in and paint.
I think it's perfect.
I think it'd be a really good idea.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I can talk all the technical stuff. I love looking at your work. I think that what you're doing in the realm of basket making is so beautiful.
Thank you, Carrie. Thank you.
I mean,
I love working 3-dimensionally. My woven pieces were aching to get off the wall when I fell into basketry. I took a class with Lissa Hunter, and we were supposed to embellish a basket. So I bought 2 little Indonesian baskets, and I brought them in, and I said, I'd like to just work on these because I'm not a basket maker. And she looked at me. I guess she had seen my work before. She looked at me and she said, "Oh no, you're going to learn to make a basket. I used to be a weaver too." And so she taught me how to coil, and I made a basket about this big, because coiling is very slow, in that first class, and I was hooked. I mean, it was great and wonderful to move on and still be in love with what I do, through the decades, because I allow myself to experiment and change and try new things. And the basketry is it right now. But somehow or another, the indigo always came with me. I have a dye pot in a small bathroom in my studio, the second bathroom in my studio. And it's a full-time dye lab. And it's wonderful to have it available whenever I am moved, or whenever somebody comes over and says, well, Indigo, what's that? I just whip out a handkerchief and said, want to try it? And it's great fun. I'm wondering if anybody has questions.
I do, if I can.
Please.
Please.
Barbara, it's so good to see all of your artworks and everything. I just noticed that, we were actually introduced by Lou, the San Francisco Fiber, back in 2017. So it was like coming full circle, almost like a moment for me.
Lou Grantham.
Yes.
Another old friend. She was at San Francisco State for many years, and we became really good friends there. In fact, we were such good friends that when my kids gave a surprise, I don't know, maybe 50th birthday party or something like that at a fancy restaurant, they invited Lou. And thank goodness they did, because my husband had just had surgery and she wanted to dance, so we danced together.
Oh, that is so awesome. Oh, so my question is, do you so of course you have explored all of these like shape and form. Do you actually are you thinking of adding some functionality to your work? So for example, like adding some sound elements to your basketry or something like that? Like what kind of things are you experimenting right now?
I haven't gone into sound at all. I do combine my basketry materials with paper and other elements, not so much plastic or parts of watches or anything like that. But I'm kind of a traditionalist. I'm not in that I need to make functional objects, because I don't. Rarely. But I'm sort of content where I am right now, exploring form and improving my technique. I've been making baskets for almost 20 years or so, but I still consider myself a novice. There are members in my guild who have done basketry for 40 years or 50 years, and I still have a lot to learn in that regard. And there's so many wonderful people to learn from. But I also teach basketry. I mean, almost from the beginning, at least by the time I was a 8 or 10-year-old basket maker, I was teaching. And so I teach a lot, and that occupies a certain amount of my time. Sound, no, I know that Roland works with a sound engineer in his works. I don't know if you saw that lecture, but if you didn't, you should see the recording of that one. That would be the answer to your question. But it's not something I've gotten into, no. Do you have suggestions for me?
Not necessarily a suggestion. Something that would interact with people more so than, just looking at things or touching. So something that would, give them more incentive to interact with all of their senses, because I feel like in this day and age with the digital technology and being as advanced as it is right now with AI and whatnot, I feel like we are getting further and further away of our interactions as humans. And your work being so tactile is just very it's very human, what I mean?
Yes, it's very hands-on. What appeals to me in artwork, in craft especially, is when you can see the human hand in it. In other words, I would rather have a pot where you see the fingers and maybe two were closer together than the others. That moves me. It's the humanity of it. So when you say, I'm not going to put AI into my work, I want to get away from that and into a grounded sphere of the humanity of the maker and the person who can hold it and feel it, smell it, know that it was soft when it was wet. That's sort of what's important to me. This is a pineapple I made, by the way, not blue. It's almost too figurative for me, but once I looked at my pattern that I was making closely, I said, that really looks like a pineapple. So then I went and studied pineapples. See, this is the way the brain works. And I learned that pineapples are not native to Hawaii. And of course, there was a lot of human capital expended in the growing of pineapples, not always in a nice condition, certainly not. And that they were so popular in England in the 19th century that you could rent one for a fancy dinner party. And so that you could have it as the center of your, imagine if it rotted, the center of your table for, for the night, and then you could give it back because that was a sign of wealth. And if you look carefully, there are pineapples on the doorposts of houses and on the tops of buildings all over London. In fact, what's the big tennis tournament? The World, it's not the World Cup, the Wimbledon. The trophy for Wimbledon, if you look at it, the top of it, the very top of it is a pineapple. So I learned a lot about pineapples before I got into it. I mean, I'm very much of an academic at heart. When I started a piece of artwork that dealt with the costume from the Ainu people in a series I did years ago of power garments, which I didn't show you. I read 20 books on the Ainu people before I made my object. And then I went to Stanford University, and the director there of the gallery let me see and actually handle. He said, "You can touch it. The Ainus did." The costume they had in their collection on display that was just being put away at the end of the exhibit was quite a nice experience, actually. So it's the tactile is very important to me. My hands are very important to me. My hands are sometimes painful, and they're certainly getting older. The fingers are crooked now. When I was a young woman, I modeled with my hands, the photos of lovely things. Nobody would want to look at them now. But what I can do with my hands and what you can see with your eyes is way more important to me than anything else, or the touch that the person who buys it has. Yeah. And when I see students accomplishing a simple hexagonal pattern, which is not very intuitive, and they make their first little hexagonal piece, which I love hexagonal weave structure, and I see the response, I did it. That's what it's all about. Teachers know that. Any other questions?
Can you hear me now? Yes. It's not a question so much as a comment, but I feel like with what you're talking about with the humanity of the making and the touch, I also felt that in how you were interacting with other people, like having people send you scraps from different parts of their lives or their memories. I thought that was so beautiful, the way you were interweaving it, and then using the gold for healing. And just a beautiful reference. Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, it's really beautiful to see your work. So thank you.
You're very welcome. Thank you.
I also had a question in regards to your basket weaving, because I've personally never seen indigo within basket weaving before, and I was just curious as to what fibers you used to kind of
most of the baskets that you saw that have indigo are made out of cane, and cane is the outer skin of the rattan that rattan furniture is made out of. Most of it comes from the Philippines, some from China, and the cane. Let me see if I have. The cane naturally has a beveled edge at the top because it's coming off of a round piece. So it's cut off the top of a round piece. So it has a little beveled edge depending on how fat the piece of vine is that they cut. And then to make the Sidori cane, you actually take a knife or a tool, like a a fixed blade that you can draw it through to scrape off the top. And that's how that gives you the same pithy surface that you have on the interior. You can see up here, you see how that's all blue, because that's that pithy surface that the dye adheres to, and it won't adhere to the smooth part on top. So that's how I got that. How did I get into dyeing it? You know, I was already dyeing everything that I wanted to in indigo. So it was natural for me to put the materials in indigo to see what happened. What if? That's how your practice grows. While I'm working on something, in my mind, I'm saying, well, what if I had made it taller? Or what if I had eliminated this, or what, and so forth. Little note goes down on a piece of paper or notebook. And then the next time I try that. I have been in numerous workshops with Japanese basket makers, and I have often asked them, do you ever dye your materials in indigo? And this is the response I get: no. As in, well, geez, why not? I really like that response, and it's happened more than once. And sometimes I will show them a picture of a bamboo basket that I did that has indigo dyed elements in it. You have to smooth off the indigo exterior, or use the inside indigo bamboo, sorry, to get it to adhere. Same thing as the cane.
I just think that's like wonderful, because I would have never thought of using like just like the genuine raw material, like, because you can use bamboo and like fiber and stuff, but like I just think that's so amazing. I would have never thought about that. And it's so beautiful as well.
Thank you. Yeah, it's not my favorite color. My favorite color is purple. People always say, is your favorite color blue? Well, no, it actually isn't. It's purple. I can't help that. It's been my favorite color since probably junior high school. And I know that it's my favorite color. It goes very well with indigo. But I love working with it. And it's a primary color. So it can be added on top of things. It can be combined with other colors to get a variety of colors as well in dyeing. And I've done that in the past when I was doing a lot of dyeing of cloth or my hand-woven fabrics and so forth. Yeah, but thank you. Yeah, you just have to keep asking yourself, what if, and keep working, and things happen. And seek out the best teachers you can get, like Karen Hampton.
Yeah, I took a fibers ecologies class with Karen last semester and kind of like fell in love with like indigo dyeing. And even though like the class was like virtual, I still like learned so much, and like that kind of like created like just an automatic interest for me into like natural dyeing. So I've been trying to incorporate that into like a lot of my fashion design, because I'm a fashion design student. So, but I'm just so fascinated like with all these different like, it's not, I mean, like it's not just cloth, that you're making. Like I think that's just really, really cool and really beautiful.
Yeah, I'm sure soon there will be dozens of basket makers dyeing their materials in indigo, but I haven't come across anybody yet, except my own students who have learned it from me.
Yeah.
Did you have a question, Liz? Or you're muted?
I was waving goodbye because I have to go, but I want to thank you so much. So thank you.
And go on teaching children. I think that's the best. Young people, that's great. Bravo. Thank you.
Does anyone else have any questions or anything else they'd like to add?
Maybe just a comment. Just a quick comment, Barbara. You were saying that when you were asking the Japanese basket weavers, like, have you ever dye their works in indigo? Then they said no. I learned from a Japanese fabric dyeing artist in Kyoto a while back. He was saying that the people who use and make those indigo vats, they tend to be very protective about those
Mhm.
vats, and they only let
Yes.
certain people to use them. So
Yes.
it's not an easy access for them at all. And he, being a younger artist at that time, he really had to fight for access because
Mhm.
he was saying to me that his earliest works, because he was not seen as someone worthy, his
Yeah.
previous fabrics were cut out by some people.
Yeah, it's different in Japan.
For sure, for sure.
The guilds, as speaking in terms of medieval Europe, each guild was very protective of its techniques and so forth. And the indigo dyers, it doesn't overlap with other artisans the way here you go to a university and you can take an indigo workshop or spend some time there, and then the teacher is teaching basketry in the next room and you can decide to put the two together. It's different learning structure there, but I love the response that I get when I ask the question. So who knows? And it's tough to learn to dye with indigo on your own, and you can buy the pre-reduced and so forth and get a pretty pretty good result, but it's not something you want to spend your life doing. It's too expensive and it's not healthy and so forth and so on. But you can also follow the path that I have followed and eventually learn your skills in indigo. There are DVDs with Michelle Garcia's workshops available for purchase, and so you can learn some and teach yourself. You can take a workshop. I used to take the indigo on the road and teach it. I would fly places or drive with two huge 30-gallon electric canning pots that I used for heating the dye bath. And then I had to tell the students to please bring buckets with you to take the dye home because I can't take it home with me. I no longer do that. If students want to come see indigo, they have to come to my studio. I just, there are things you give up as you grow older. I guess that's one of, I'm not schlepping that stuff anymore. But I do love teaching the basketry classes. So I'll go on doing that as long as I can.
I have another question for you. I know you said earlier that your favorite bat was like the iron bat of like indigo to
Yes.
use. What is there like a specific reason for that, or?
It has a slightly higher pH, so it works very well on paper and on basketry materials. And I've been using it for a long time, and I'm very comfortable with it. I know it well. I also use a henna vat if I'm going to dye, silk scarves like that, or something else. It's just the one that works for me with what I'm using, and it's not hard to do. And it does a good job with the little vials that you make for painting with indigo. And when you paint with with active indigo, you cannot put your brush in and say, now I wonder where I'm going to paint next, because it's already deactivated on your brush. So it's a question of going from the little pot onto the paper, quickly onto the paper and draw. So it's something to learn to do, but it was used in the production of multicolored textiles in France and in England. And the only thing they found that would reduce it well in those days was arsenic. So there was this cadre of young women who were in poorly ventilated rooms inhaling arsenic, 7 days or 6 days a week or whatever it was. So that went by the wayside after they found synthetic indigo and other ways of working. You'll see cloths that are obviously the red is printed, the yellow is printed, and then on these perfectly registered yellow and red florals, for example, you see what really looks like you know, inside the lines, outside the lines, a little messy, a little fast. And that way, I love that. You know, the human hand has been involved there. And you can read those textiles and know that it's what they called penciling. And here's that problem of pinceau and pencil. Penciling is what the technique of painting with a brush, pinceau French, on cloth is called. And I like that. I got off track, but I tend to do that, which is why I write my talks out.
Nancy, you had something?
Yeah, hi. I just wanted to really thank you for sharing your work and all your knowledge. I mean, it's really beautiful. And thank you, Karen, for the series. I loved every single talk. It was just amazing. But a few things just popped up. I mean, you've answered a few because I'm not a dyer, but I'm interested in drawing and working with it as a drawing medium. So I think I will explore it more. I do mostly drawing with red cochineal ink from Mexico, so I'm used to using that kind of a material. I also want to say congratulations on 55 years of marriage. I thought that was just a beautiful thing to share with us. Thank you for that too.
But thank you. We're going back to Lausanne, Switzerland in July for a few days, back to where we met, which I think is, we haven't been back in 30 years. I'm really looking forward to that. I have a daughter who arranged it, you know, because we wouldn't maybe not make this trip right now without her. She had a conference there, so she's taking us to Lausanne. If you want some instruction on how to do the thickened indigo, write to me. That last slide had my website, but if you know my name, you can find my website. And you can write to me through my website and remind me who you are, where we met, and that you're interested in the didactic on the painting with the thickened indigo, and I'll be happy to send it to you.
Oh, thank you very much. I really appreciate that.
But remember what I said about get on the paper, write fast, so practice it.
And that's how I draw anyways. I do the same thing with the other ink, you know, there's no like, oh, what am I doing? It's like immediate. So I thought, wow, that could work. Thank you.
I would also suggest that you look at John Marshall and his use of using soy milk and painting with soy milk and indigo.
Yeah, so you paint the soy milk. You paint the soy milk on the surface on paper or cloth first, and then you paint with the thickened indigo rapidly, and it adheres very nicely as well. But you can't wash those.
Yeah, you have to let them sit. They're pretty incredible if you let them age for a long time.
Long time, like a long time.
Yeah.
When I paint on fabric, it's active indigo is the same as dipping, except that you get a lighter color because it's half oxidized by the time you get it on the brush. So you have to do a number of layers. But once it's on the cloth and it's been allowed to rest, it's active indigo, it goes into the cloth and it's actually dyed. It's not on the surface. My understanding is that you cannot wash those textiles that have the soy milk holding the dye on. Maybe I'm wrong, but
I was able to do it with raffia cloth.
Oh, okay.
And what happened was that I put it away and I forgot about it. And
Perfect.
I decided I would over dye it. So I was washing it out to over dye it. And there it was, fixed in it.
It didn't come out.
No,
Excellent. Good.
It was really an interesting effect for me.
Yeah, good to know. Yeah, John Marshall's website has a wealth of information on it. He's very generous with didactic information on the website, and he teaches wonderful workshops. But definitely worth looking at that as well. He's a jewel. He's a treasure. Yeah.
Well, I think that, yep, it's come time to end, and I just want to thank all of you for coming. I think this has been a really, really interesting talk, and as I said, I love looking at Barbara's work, and really just thank you so much, Barbara.
My pleasure.
Thank you for being such a connector of the world.
Oh, that's very nice. Thank you. I can't wait to hear the next lecture. And you're giving a lecture too as well.
Yeah,
At
and
the end
I'll
of the
have
series.
one at the end of the series that when mine will be
Perfect.
talking about kind of American history.
Okay, fair enough. Looking forward to it. All right. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you, Barbara. Thank you, Karen.
Thank you.
I'll stay on with you for just a moment, Karen.
Okay. I am trying to stop.
There we go.